You are doing fine. You know you are doing fine. And then you open your phone. And within 30 seconds, without choosing to, without wanting to, something shifts. The promotion someone else got. The relationship that looks exactly like the one you wanted. The person who started the same time as you and is somehow already 3 steps ahead. The body. The apartment. The trip. The number of people who apparently care about what they have to say. And now you feel behind. Not because anything in your life changed. Because of what you just saw in someone else's. This feeling is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not something wrong with you specifically. It is one of the most well-documented psychological mechanisms in human experience. And understanding exactly how it works and why it never stops is the first step to getting out from under it. Here is what is actually happening when this occurs. In 1954, a social psychologist named Leon Festinger published a paper that became one of the most referenced pieces of research in the history of psychology. His finding was simple and uncomfortable. Human beings do not evaluate how they are doing based on any objective standard. We evaluate how we are doing by comparing ourselves to other people. Not because we are shallow. Not because we lack self-awareness. Because we are wired this way. The brain needs a reference point to make sense of where it stands. And other people are the most available reference point there is. Festinger called it social comparison theory. And the mechanism he described explains almost everything about why social media feels the way it does. Here is how the comparison engine actually works inside your mind. When you look at someone who is doing better than you in a specific area, and the gap feels impossible to close, your brain does not respond with neutral observation. It responds with a threat signal. The same neurological alarm that fires when you are physically in danger fires when your social standing feels threatened. Your cortisol levels rise. Your attention narrows. Everything about your own situation begins to look worse. Not because it changed, but because the alarm is amplifying the negative and filtering out the positive. And here is the specific cruelty of the way social media works. The comparison pool used to be limited. Your neighborhood, your school, your workplace. You compared yourself to the people you actually knew. Social media made the comparison pool global and curated. Every person you follow is presenting a selected, optimized version of their life. The gap you are measuring yourself against is not the gap between your life and their life. It is the gap between your full, unedited reality and their highlight reel. The brain does not automatically apply that correction. And this is why the comparison never resolves. The benchmark moves. There is always someone further ahead. The moment you close one gap, you become aware of another. The person who has what you wanted turns out to have something else you want. The achievement that was supposed to make you feel like enough does not quite do it, because by the time you get there, the comparison has recalibrated to the next level. Researchers call this the hedonic treadmill. You run. The machine keeps pace with you. You never actually get anywhere. Not because you are not capable, because the measure itself is broken. So here's the question. If comparison is wired into us, if it is automatic, neurological, not a choice, is there any way out? Or is this just the permanent cost of being a social creature in a connected world? This is where I want to bring in something you might not expect. About 2,000 years ago, long before psychology existed as a field, long before social media, long before the internet made the global comparison pool possible, a teacher named Jesus told a story. Not as a religious lesson specifically, as an observation about human nature so precise that modern psychology is still catching up to it. And the story he told identifies the comparison trap with a detail that researchers in the 1950s took decades to figure out, and then dismantles it with a single question. Here's the story. A man who owned a vineyard, a large farm, needed workers for the day. Early in the morning, he went to the market where workers gathered looking for jobs. He hired a group of them and agreed on a wage, 1 denarius. In the context of the time, this was the standard daily wage for a laborer, enough to feed a family for one day. They agreed. They went to work. 3 hours later, the owner went back to the market and found more workers standing there without jobs. He hired them too. He told them he would pay them fairly. They went into the vineyard. He did the same thing at noon, and again at 3 in the afternoon. And then, 1 hour before the end of the working day, When the light was already getting low, he went back to the market one more time. There were still workers there, standing, waiting, all day. Why are you still here? Because no one hired us. Go into the vineyard, he said. At the end of the day, the owner told his manager to pay everyone, starting with the workers who arrived last. The workers who arrived at 5 o'clock, 1 hour of work, each received 1 denarius. And the workers who arrived first thing in the morning and worked all day through the heat watched this happen. And they thought, if the 1-hour workers got a full day's wage, then surely we will get more. They each received 1 denarius. And they were furious. And here's the thing. They were not wrong about the math. They worked longer. That is objectively true. More hours, more heat, more effort. But look at what actually changed and what did not. They agreed to 1 denarius. They received 1 denarius. Nothing was taken from them. The terms they agreed to were met completely. Honestly, on time. What changed was that they saw someone else receive the same amount for less work. And the moment that comparison entered the picture, something that was completely sufficient 5 minutes ago suddenly felt like an insult. Not because anything changed in what they received, because something changed in how they were now measuring it. This is the mechanism the workers fell into. And this is the same mechanism that fires every time you open social media and walk away feeling behind. Your life did not change. Your circumstances did not change. The comparison changed how you experienced the circumstances you already had. Psychologist Sonia Lyubomirsky at UC Davis spent decades studying what actually makes people unhappy. And her research consistently found that the single biggest predictor of unhappiness is not the objective quality of a person's life. It is whether they are running a constant comparison process against other people's lives. 2 people with genuinely identical circumstances, same job, same income, same relationship status, same apartment, can have completely different levels of satisfaction with their lives. The only variable, one person is in a comparison frame. The other is not. Now the owner of the vineyard responds to the angry workers. And what he says is one of the most precise things anyone has ever said about the comparison trap. He says, "Did I not pay you exactly what we agreed? Take your wage and go. I want to give the last workers the same as I gave you. Do I not have the right to do what I want with my own resources?" And then the question, the one that carries everything. Are you envious because I am generous? That question does something very specific. It names the mechanism. Are you in pain? Not because you were wronged, not because anything was taken from you, but because someone else received something good? That is what the original Greek word in this story actually means. The word translated as envious is paneros. It literally means an evil eye. And in the culture where this story was told, the evil eye was not about magic or curses. It was a specific metaphor for a specific internal posture. The inability to look at someone else's blessing without feeling your own diminish. The evil eye described someone whose experience of their own good things was actively corrupted by the awareness of what someone else had. Sound familiar? So the story is not about whether the workers deserved more. That is the wrong question. The story is about what happened inside the workers the moment comparison entered the picture. They were fine before they saw the other group's payment. The wage was enough. The agreement was honored. And then one look at what someone else received, someone who had worked less, and suddenly everything they had felt wrong. The comparison did not just make them feel bad. It corrupted their experience of something that was genuinely good. And here is the point that the story makes, that modern psychology took decades to catch up to. The reason the comparison never satisfies is not that you need more. It is that comparison itself is a broken measuring tool. It cannot give you what you are looking for, because the benchmark is never stable. The moment you match where someone else is, they move. Or you find someone else ahead. The measuring never stops because there is always another measurement to make. So what does the story offer instead of comparison? The owner of the vineyard is not running a payroll system. He is not calculating hours and assigning proportional value. He goes out at 5 o'clock, 1 hour before the end of the day, specifically to find the workers who had been waiting all day with no one to hire them. He goes looking for the ones the market overlooked, and he gives them a full day's wage. Not because they earned it by the hours worked, because that is the kind of owner he is. This is what the story is actually about. Not fairness in the conventional sense. Something different from fairness. A generosity that does not operate by the rules of the comparison engine. A system where your value is not calculated relative to someone else's performance. Where the question is not what did they get versus what did you get, but did you receive what you needed? There is a practical difference between two orientations. The first orientation, I evaluate how I am doing by measuring myself against other people. My satisfaction depends on where I rank. My experience of what I have is filtered through the lens of what they have. The second orientation, I evaluate what I have by asking whether it is enough for what I actually need, independent of what anyone else received. These two orientations can coexist with identical external circumstances and produce completely different internal experiences. The research consistently shows this. The story of the vineyard illustrates exactly this. Same wage, different orientation, completely different experience of the day. Here is what the story does not say. It does not say effort is meaningless. It does not say hours worked are irrelevant. It does not say everyone should receive the same regardless of contribution in all situations. What it says is more specific than that. It says that when you evaluate your own life through the lens of what someone else received, when your satisfaction depends on that comparison being favorable, you have handed the keys to your own contentment to a process that will never give them back. Because there will always be a worker hired earlier who got the same. There will always be someone who got what you got for less work. There will always be a gap somewhere. And if the gap is what you are measuring, you will always be measuring a gap. So here is the practical question. How do you actually shift the orientation? 3 things. First, notice the comparison when it is happening. Not to judge yourself for it. It is automatic. Just name it. I just compared myself to someone. That is the comparison engine running. You do not have to follow it. Second, change the question you are asking. The comparison question is, how do I measure up against them? The independent question is, what do I actually have, and is it enough for what I need right now? Same circumstances. Completely different question. Completely different experience. Third, try this once. Genuinely try it. Find one person whose success or life you have been comparing yourself against, and say something genuinely glad about what they have. Not performed, not forced, but look for something real to be glad about for them. The research from gratitude psychologist Robert Emmons shows this practice directly weakens the comparison engine's hold. Not because you suppress anything, but because you activate a completely different internal system. 2,000 years ago, a teacher told a story about workers in a vineyard who received exactly what they agreed to, and were furious about it, because of what someone else received. The comparison engine is not new. It is not a product of social media. It is wired into human psychology in a way that researchers are still mapping. But what the story of the vineyard offers is something the algorithm cannot. A different measuring system entirely. One where your value is not calculated relative to someone else's performance. One where the owner goes out at 5 o'clock, at the last possible moment, to find the people the market overlooked, and gives them a full day's wage. Not because they earned it by the hours, because that is the kind of owner he is. You were not hired at the wrong time. You are not behind. The wage is not being withheld because of when you showed up or how many hours you have put in compared to someone else. The owner went out looking for you too. Tell me in the comments, where does comparison hit you hardest right now? What is the comparison that follows you most? I read every one.